Oh, righty. Welcome once again to another edition of Learn Photography. Bleh, I can talk. Jesus, what's going on today? Welcome to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. This is episode 21. Yay. And there was much rejoicing. Anyway, um, what we're going to cover today is something that Brian messaged me about. So, Brian, I don't know if you want to give an intro to what it is that you were looking for. Or you want me to just go ahead
Oh,
and
this was the compositing double exposure
correct?
thingy. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, he sent me a few examples, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of break it down to some of the basics, and that should kind of get you started on experimenting with your own double exposures. All right. For those of you who are not familiar with what a double exposure means, back in the film days, something. It's all right, Brian. I heard some snapping, breaking.
Oh, that was. I'm sorry.
All right. As long as everything's okay. A double exposure uh, was very easy to do back in the film days um, by arresting or not allowing a film to advance when you rewind it. All right.
Sorry, it's a moderate level of difficulty. That
Moderate.
wasn't easy. That was a moderate level of difficulty.
Yes, that was. Yeah,
That's all.
you had to be, you definitely had to know your camera to know how to,
And it didn't work every time.
and no. Yeah, you also had to have an understanding, I mean, a really solid understanding of exposures, because what you're doing is in essence, you're doing an overexposure of the film plate with two separate images. And so there was a lot of experimentation. So basically, the way it worked is you would take a picture of something, then arrest the film from advancing. All right. But what you're doing is you're resetting the shutter, resetting the camera to take another photo without advancing the film. And then you would aim at something else, take the photo, and then when it get developed, you would see the results of the experimentation. And of course, you know, a lot of failures came about that system. And what you found out is that it worked best when you had areas of a lot of lightness where you can take the second exposure and place whatever the subject was within the area of lightness. So, for example, your first exposure might be some bushes or foreground elements against a fairly bright sky. So you have a lot of light in the upper area. Okay. And then the second exposure might be of like a close up portrait of a person. And usually you would want to put that person against a darker background. And then you take the photo. But when you take the photo, you kind of remember whereabouts the sky section was, and then you kind of format the new composition of your portrait so that the majority of the portraits, the portraits or the face of the portrait is in the sky area. And I've experimented, and believe it or not, there are some digital cameras that will allow you. It has the feature to do a double exposure. So you can play around with your digital camera if it has that feature. Okay. If it doesn't, well, we have Photoshop to do it. And of course, with Photoshop, we have an unlimited amount of control because we're not tethered to just one type of exposure blending. And that's exactly what it is. We are blending two separate exposures into a single frame. Okay. All right. So, let me go ahead and share my screen. Share.
So Duck, when you were talking about the new ways of doing things, back in the day, I used to have my own darkroom
Yep.
and I developed my own negatives. So
Oh, well, yeah.
so what
Then,
I would do is I didn't always do what you just did, but I would just stack the negatives up
yep.
in the larger and then work with it that way, as I remember doing it. So
Yeah.
that's what
So,
inspired because I had more control, and that's what inspired it. In fact, I'm looking at a picture from 1971, and if you saw the picture, you go, "Oh, I see exactly what inspired that furnace guy, or the factory guy I sent you."
yeah,
It's
yeah. Yeah,
exactly.
so if you had access to a dark room, then yeah, your ability to create those double exposures were increased because not only can you lay two negatives against each other through the enlarger, but you can also one negative at a time down on the paper. You can block out certain areas of the
Yeah.
paper, switch the negative and unblock that area and be able to control it that way. That's old school Photoshop. That's old school compositing. Um, and of course, those of you who've spent hours in the dark room understand how tedious masking was in those days, because in reality, what you were doing is you were cutting an actual mask, usually out of some light blocking material, um, and placing it over the piece of paper so it wouldn't get exposed to the enlarger. And that's where the term masking came in, you know? So all the tools that we have in Photoshop, if you follow the legacy, it goes back to the physical darkroom, you know? But anyway, but because we have Photoshop, guess what? We don't have to spend hours and hours and hours creating masks in a dark room. We can do it very, very quickly in Photoshop. All right. So let me switch over. Where am I? Okay. Desktop. This is what we're going to be creating today. All right. So in preparation for this, I'm like, all right, what can I come up with that's going to be fairly interesting, but yet easy enough to replicate without getting into a lot of explanations. And of course, there are a ton of tutorials on YouTube that allows you to kind of replicate things. But the images, or I'm sorry, the tutorials that I find on YouTube tend to be a one-trick pony type explanation. It's like, take this image, do this, and voila, this is what you get. But there's no explanation as to how you got there, why you would choose those images. So, you know me, I would rather give you that information than to say, do this, mash them together, and voila. Okay. So, in order to get this image, we have to delve a little bit into blend modes. Okay. And blend modes is one of those things in Photoshop that can be very, very complex. All right. And a lot of people have a hard time understanding what the end results are going to be, or at least being able to pre-visualize what the end results is going to be. Because as you know, whenever whenever you're trying to create something in Photoshop, you kind of want to have an idea of what you want to create in advance, and then you take your knowledge of the tools and then apply that to get to the end results. But if you don't know what the tools are, that becomes a hindrance. But also, if you know the tool but don't quite understand how the tool works, that becomes an additional frustration. And let me tell you, blend mode still continues to be a little bit of a frustration for me, because there's a lot of nuances in it, and there's a lot of maths behind it that I just haven't wrapped my head around. All right. So unfortunately, I can't give you that where you walk away with this, profound knowledge of blend modes. But hopefully, we'll get you to a point where you understand them a little bit better and you feel comfortable experimenting with them a little bit more. Okay? Fair enough? All right. So for this explanation, what I did is I created this graph, and as you can see, it's just 5 tonalities from white to black, going in horizontal. Hold on a second, I gotta check. For some reason, my screen is flickering. Somehow I think I may have plugged in the wrong power adapter. Hopefully I don't blow it out. But anyway, so we have 5 different stripes of tonality, going from black at the bottom to white at the top, 50% gray in the middle, and then 25 and 75 in between those. Okay. And then on top of that, I took the same white to black linear grid, and I overlaid it at a 90-degree rotation. Okay. All right. And what we're going to do is we're just going to step through what all the blend modes are, because in order to create that overexposure, what we're working with is a blending of the layer above with the layer below. Okay. So we have to have maybe not a deep understanding, but at least somewhat a rudimentary understanding of how the blend modes operate. Okay. So I figured this would be a good way of introducing you to them. Okay. And we have touched upon them in the past, but we'll go through a little bit right now. Okay. So whether right here, I have each one of these. There's 5 different shades of gray, and I just combined them into a group. Okay, so I'm operating within a group, but even within a group, you have the ability to control the blend modes. All right, so even though I'm not doing them individually, I'm doing it as a group. Right, the first thing you're going to see is the group will say, instead of normal, it'll say pass through. Okay, pass through. All right, so that's the only difference between a group and an individual layer. Okay, just wanted to get that cleared up. All right, if we open up the blend mode, okay, which is in your layers panel, okay, you're going to notice, all right, that we have a bunch of choices. Okay. And the one thing I want to mention right here is to start off with, you really don't need to understand what each one individually does per se, but you do need to understand what each group does. All right. And what I mean by that is that if we look at it, the first two are normal and dissolve. Okay. Dissolve does some really weird pixelation stuff, which is not going to be visible because we're dealing with solid colors, but it's hardly ever used. Okay. But so the first group has two items. It's a normal group. Normal, meaning that it's really not going to affect the layer all that much. Okay. The next group is what we call the darkened group. And the reason we call it the darkened group is because the first item in that list is darkened. And the majority of, well, all of these within that group basically will darken your image. Okay. Will darken your image. Each one of those will darken it in slightly different ways, but they very much darken the image. All right. So you can see when we go from normal, all right, we have a lot of light areas over on the left-hand side, and it's much darker, darker tones on the right-hand side. But as soon as we hit that darken, we'll see that the bottom part has now darkened. All right. So overall, the whole image has darkened. Okay. And what that means is that it's taking the top layer and blending it with the bottom layer in a mathematical way. So it's taking whatever is darker, all right, and bringing it forward. Okay. So whatever is darker is the more dominant tonality that comes through. Okay. Whatever is lighter kind of gives way. All right. And that's pretty much what you need to understand for this entire group, but they're going to behave slightly different with some nuances. Okay. But I'll let you know that the two more popular of these blend modes is either going to be darken or multiply, and multiply is the second one. All right. And you can see how multiply creates more of a subtle gradation as it blends the top layer with the vertical stripes with the bottom layer of the horizontal stripes. Okay. Where white on top of white remains white, and you'll see that all the way in that upper left-hand corner. Okay. And anything that is black, all right, is going to overpower anything else. Okay. So it doesn't matter if the, like that horizontal stripe of black going over areas of white and light gray, doesn't matter. It's going to overpower it. Okay. However, when we get into tonalities of gray, so the three middle stripes, going horizontally and the three middle stripes going vertically, you'll see how they affect each other in a multiplicative way. All right. So that, for example, let's go to multiply. Let me put a layer on top of this. Let me get a brush. And let me get a color that's going to contrast nicely. Okay. Where are we? B. All right. So over here we have black. Oh, there we go. What's going on? Oh, my opacity is low. Here we go. Be nice if I, all right, we have black, we have dark gray, all right, we have middle gray, we have light gray. Oh, let me change that. Light gray, and then we have white. Okay, so going down, all right, you can see how it affects the correlating linear gradient. All right, so we have white going across, we have light gray going across, mid gray going across, dark going across, and then let me check, dark gray going across, and then of course black going across. Okay, so the intersection of these lines and columns creates these variations. All right, so black will always override 100% black. All right, let me make that clear. 100% black will kind of overpower everything. Okay, but as we know, when we take a photograph, you know, if we keep our exposure within a certain limit, we may not have values of 100% black, and we also may not have values of 100% white. Okay, so keep that in mind. But black will override everything. Okay, however, when we get into tonality, what we get is a multiplication of the tonality of the lower layer multiplied with the tonality of the layer above it. Okay, so if you have two dark tones together, multiplied together will become a much darker tone. And we can see that right here with the dark gray, which wasn't this dark. Dark gray and dark gray multiplied gives us almost a black. Okay, all right, everybody sees that? Okay, and of course we have well, white on white, but our white row, actually let me go ahead and delete that. Our white row and our let's see, white column. Okay, I'll oh, this is white row, white column. All right, this is light gray. Okay, light gray on the white column will tint that white. I'm sorry, the light gray column will tint the white stripe going across so that it's darkening it. All right, so we're multiplying that light gray with white. So whatever value that light gray is will stay there, because multiplying light gray with white isn't going to alter it. Okay, the same thing with mid gray. All right, and the same way with our darker gray. Okay, it's not until we get some tonality going into that second layer. All right, so if we look at the row here with the light gray going across, okay, this light gray and this light gray together creates a much darker gray. All right, so we're multiplying those two values. All right, everybody understand this concept?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, I don't want to beat it to death if I don't need to. All right, I just want you guys to understand the basics. Okay, now me explaining it with a very simple graphic like this, it's very easy to follow. But when it comes to a photograph, you know that the tonality is all over the place. Okay, so let me take and bring this up. Okay, we have, I purposely stripped all the color out of this and kept it to a black and white image. Okay, my background, all right, actually let me go ahead and get rid of that. Oops. Delete. All right. Our background is 100% white. Okay, so that is the same as our white stripe underneath. Okay, so understanding what we've discussed before, what is the expected results? Well, it's going to be expected that everything along this stripe here, all right, is going to retain whatever tonality is here. So white on top of white will remain white. Dark gray, all right, on top of white will remain dark gray, and middle gray on top of white will remain middle gray. Make sense? Okay. But now we get a little bit more complex when we have an underlying tonality. So we have our light gray here going across, right? So light gray with white, okay, is going to give us what? My expectation is that everything in here is going to remain light gray from that underlying layer. However, we are going to multiply everything here, all right, and then I'm expecting everything here to get darker. Okay, darker. So these light tones will get multiplied with that light gray. The mid-tones will become darker, and so on. All right. And we can probably expect the same exact thing to happen as we go all the way across here. All right. Because this here is now a much, the mid-tone, all right, is much darker. All right. We're going to get mid-tone, mid on the white section, but everything in here will get darker. All right. And in some areas, we'll probably even go to black. All right. Keeping that, we can probably assume the same thing here as we go across. All right. This is going to pick up the dark tone, and this is going to get darker, and this will probably go to black, right? And then, of course, we have black here. What's the expectation? Well, I'm expecting this to turn to black, and probably, well, we have tonality here, so this will definitely probably turn very dark. All right, and this will probably stay black. Okay, that's the expectation. Let's see if that happens. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have our portrait layer selected. We're going to go to our darken. Okay, and we can see, oh, see, my calculations was a little bit off. All right, this right here, I was expecting to become darker. I forgot. Black will always be black. 100% black, 100% black will always be black. All right. So that's a hard rule. Okay. And we can see that in this area here, oops, in this area here, the tonality hasn't changed. And here, the tonality pretty much hasn't changed either, okay? And my prediction was that it would go darker, okay? But what we're noticing is that it only went darker in areas that is lighter than the tonality underneath it, okay? So if we turn this back to normal, oops, wrong one. Where are we? Turn that back to normal. All right. See this area here with the glasses. All right. If we this area here, admit. Okay. All right. Where the inner part of the glasses is white. All right. And we've got some very, very light tones. Okay. Once we change that to to darken, all right, it has darkened that area that was white, okay, but anything below that light really doesn't see that much of a change, okay. As a matter of fact, we don't notice anything until we start getting into the much darker tones, okay, which brings us to the next lesson that I want you to keep in mind. Hey, Mark, glad you can join us. We are talking about blending layers, blending modes, and leading up to creating a double exposure. Okay. So the reason I'm kind of dwelling on this a lot is because you're going to notice a certain trend amongst all of these blend modes. And that is how it interacts with middle gray. All right. Middle gray, of course, being 50% gray. Okay. Middle gray is kind of like the pivot. All right. So you can see that anything below middle gray, all right, I shouldn't use below or above, okay, anything lighter than middle gray, you're not going to see too much of an influence in this blend mode, all right, in the darken mode, okay. Why? Because what we're dealing with is darker pixels from both layers. So whatever pixels are darker becomes the dominant pixel that carries across in the blend. Okay. And then anything darker than 50% gray, middle gray, you're going to see a higher influence. Okay. All right. So just to go over it very, very quickly, darken modes tend to darken the overall image. Okay. And each individual one is going to darken it in a unique way. All right. And then we just introduced middle gray being the point that you might call it the demarcation line. All right. The reason I point this out is because as you are manipulating any kind of double exposure, or any time that you are using layer blend modes, you can manipulate how they interact by creating a curves adjustment layer to manipulate one or both layers. So for example, if I take a curves adjustment layer and I pin it, you need to pin it to, I'm going to pin it to the portrait layer. Okay. Let's move this over here. Okay. And if I lighten everything, okay, you will see that anything that is turning to white, okay. Here, let me go back to a normal, okay. Anything on that portrait layer that is now becoming lighter, okay, is going to interact a lot more heavily with the underlying tones. So the underlying tones will override it, okay. If I darken things, all right, and now we turn that back on. Oops, wrong layer. Let's go back to the, all right. You can see how the black or the darker of the portrait layer is now affecting the underlying horizontal stripes, okay? All right, so we can manipulate that in order to create, you know, the look that we want, okay? We can even manipulate it by adjusting the midtones, okay? And remember, the midtones is what really creates that turning point between being affected and not being affected. All right. Any questions so far? Let me get rid of that curves adjustment just because we don't need it right now. Okay.
So what you're saying, Doug, the darker layer will always prevail.
In the darken modes, yes.
Yes.
So we have the darken, we have multiply, color burn, light, linear burn, and darker color. All right. If we, again, in the wrong layer, let's go back to the portrait layer. Okay. So this is with the darken layer. Let me bring this back up. Okay. Let me just, there we go. Okay. So you can see when I take that portrait layer and put it in darken mode, you cannot see, where's my blue? Okay. You cannot see that seam. Okay. Because remember, my background for this image was white. So white is interacting with everything going across here. All right. So all of these colors are now, in essence, showing through the white. All right. Because we're taking, again, light gray, multiplying it with the white, taking light gray, and multiplying it with, you know, whatever tonalities are present in here, or actually, no, not there, in here, okay? And we're taking the mid gray and we're multiplying it with everything here, okay? Remember, because we're dealing with stripes, all right? The darker gray interacts with everything here, and the darker tonalities will prevail. There's going to be the dominant ones, okay? This layer by itself, not very interesting, okay? So I don't tend to use this all too often. The one that I do use a lot is the multiply, okay? And now what you're going to see is a slightly different behavior with the image above it, or I'm sorry, the portrait layer with the underlying stripes. Okay. Again, the background's white, so we're not going to notice any difference other than it's picking up the underlying stripes. Okay. So that part remains the same. Okay. White is retained, light gray is retained, middle gray is retained, and so on. Okay. And that's only against the solid white. Okay. Anything that is solid black will be retained. All right. So of course, this being solid black, that gets retained, but anything that is solid black within the portrait image is going to be retained. Everything else gets multiplied together. Okay. And with this, it's the multiply layer. It's plain and simple. Anything that is not white and is not black gets multiplied. Well, actually, everything that is white and black gets multiplied, but 0 multiplied by 1 is still 0. 1 multiplied by 0 is still 0. Okay, so it's going to be no effect. All right, but everything in between, and oh, I should probably explain why I said 0 and 1. 0 is, what is it? Yeah, 0 is white, 1 is black. All right. All the tonalities, the shades in between are fractions in between. All right. So if we're using 258 shades of gray, you're going to have 258 divisions between 0 and 1. Okay. And that's the value that it's being multiplied. So middle gray is 0.5. Middle gray and middle gray together, 0.5 times 0.5 is what? Okay. All right. So let me show that in a simpler method. So let's get rid of the portrait and we'll bring back this vertical. Okay. All right. So here we have middle gray in my row and middle gray in my column, right? Row and column. All right. This is the intersection of the two. Those two values get multiplied together. Okay. And you can see that it's almost the same value here. Okay. Almost the same value. All right. Almost that 75% gray. Okay. All right. Now, what I said earlier is that it's hard to understand the concepts, all right, unless you've spent time playing with it and kind of familiarizing with how tonalities intersect with each other. All right. But just remember, white against white will always be white. Black against black will always be black. With the darkened tones, black overrides everything. Okay. All right. So if we see like the color burn, okay. Well, here's kind of like one little exception where it affects the blacks and the majority of the midtones, but the white will override it. Okay, so we have some variations of it. Okay, and you can see just as you hover over these, they're going to be a little bit different. Okay, so this is darken and this is darker color. Okay, darken and darker color. All right, if you look at it, they both have the same results. Okay, this looks the same as this. All right, but there's going to be a difference. All right, darken kind of matches the two. Darker color takes the darker color and overrides it. What you're not seeing here is anything with color. All right, colors, even though when we start getting into color, it becomes a little bit more complex because if you recall, colors are created with a combination of 3 shades of gray. One on the blue channel, one on the green channel, and one on the red channel. And the combination of those 3 together gives you the color. All right. What we're doing here is we're simplifying it to black and white and the black and white interaction. All right. When we start introducing color, the maths get a lot more complex because we have the variable of 3 different channels of gray tones interacting with 3 different channels of the overlying layer gray tones. Okay. And trying to keep track of all that, unless you are, a genius above the level of Einstein, forget it. You're never going to keep track of all that. So at that point, what I normally suggest is just keep in mind, darken layers will darken your image, and then just hover and see how they interact. When it gets to color, it does some really funky stuff with the colors. All right. So just keep that in mind, and we'll see that later when we do the actual example. Okay. All right. That's an introduction to the darken layers. The next set, as you can see, is the lighten layers. And just like the darken layers, what do the lighten layers do? They lighten everything together. All right. Because what we're doing is we're now favoring anything that is white or light. Okay. So anything that's white is pretty much going to override everything. Screen is like the lightened version of multiply. All right. You can see how their interactions affect the tonalities across the board. Okay. And of course, white being the dominant. Okay. So just like multiply, you can see all those tonalities within the shades of gray. Black kind of overrides everything. Screen does the same thing, except white will override everything. Okay. And then we have color dodge, which affects, this is, for working with color, linear dodge, and lighter color. Okay. Now, for your benefit, I'm going to do a little bit of a side step here. Okay. When you dodge and burn, you can use dodge and burn with a mid-tone layer. All right. So you have a layer of 50% gray. Okay. You change the blend mode to a darkened layer. All right. So in this case, it would be multiply. Okay. Or I'm sorry. Let's see. What is it? Or linear burn. Okay. Change it to linear burn. Okay. And when you darken those 50% gray pixels, it's going to darken everything underneath it. All right. Because remember, we're dealing with a blend mode. All right. So the underlying layer, say you have your dodging and burning a landscape. Okay. And you have trees and bushes and stuff, and you want to darken certain areas. Okay. You put a 50% gray layer over it, change the blend mode to linear burn. Anything darker than 50% is going to darken the landscape. Okay. Anything lighter than 50% gray, not going to do anything. All right. So you can use that as your burn layer. Okay. You can create another 50% gray layer and do a linear dodge, and it's going to work the opposite. Anything lighter than 50% is going to lighten your landscape. Okay. Most people don't want to work on 2 separate layers. So what they often do is they will switch over to a soft light blend mode for that 50%. That way you can use white or black on the same layer and it's going to affect it, okay? Or if you want more of an effect, you would use linear light. And you can see how with dodging and burning, you can see how you would get a harsher, well, not necessarily a harsher look, but you will get to the lighter and to the darker burns and dodges a lot quicker with this blend mode than with like overlay or soft light. Okay, that's just an aside. Okay, but having said that, you can now understand that just like the darken modes, the lighten modes do the same thing. All right, and it just makes everything lighter. Okay, even too dark. All right, so if we look at the intersection of the dark gray column with the dark gray row, okay, we're not getting any darker than that 75% gray, or 75% black rather, okay? Our mid-tone is still 50% gray, all right? And it goes across the bottom 3 rows and the last 3 columns, all right? And that's how it interplays, okay? So everything gets lightened. And just like previously, my suggestion is to just hover over it and see how your image interacts, okay? All right, so everybody understands so far? Darken group darkens everything, lighten group lightens everything, okay? All right, darken pretty much favors anything that is black. Lighten favors anything that is white, okay? Now we get into the overlay group, all right? The overlay group. This one operates kind of like a blend of the two above it, but its influence is taken from middle gray, all right? So in this case, middle gray is the starting point, where in the darken groups, black is the favored tonality. The lighten modes, white is the favored tonality. In the overlay soft light modes, middle gray is the favored tonality, okay? And this is where, we get that, into the blend, into the dodge and burn using that 50% gray, all right? This is why we can take and use that to darken and lighten our image, all right? But you can see in overlay, white kind of overpowers everything, black kind of overpowers anything. So when you use these, I suggest taking your brush and instead of applying 100% white or 100% black, you dial it down to like 5% or even 10%, 5%, on occasion, maybe even 1%. Okay, where you're applying 1% of that white or 1% of that black, and then using a soft round brush, you apply it, because you can see here how white kind of overpowers everything, all right, and how black overpowers everything, right? And if you notice, the break points on that black and white area is the middle gray. So if you look at the middle gray column, or the middle gray row, okay, everything from that middle gray above into the white is overpowered by white. Everything from that middle gray black down along the bottom is overpowered by black. Okay. Soft light where are we? Soft light, you'll notice, gives you the most flexibility within all the tonalities in the middle. White wipes everything out, black wipes everything out. Okay. And for this reason, soft light tends to also be a favorite blend mode when doing dodging and burning. Okay. Hard light, you can see, all right, it's a little bit harder. All right. It's kind of like overlay, but overlay white, um, the underlying white kind of overpowers everything. With hard light, with hard light, it's the layer above that kind of overpowers everything. Okay. All right. What I would suggest you do, if you have time, create yourself a grid like this. Just create, to start off five rows. Duplicate that, rotate it in order to get 5 columns, and then just play with all of these. Okay. Difference, exclusion, subtraction, and division. Those have their special uses in some cases, but for image manipulation like this, you're probably not going to use them. Okay. Oh, there's hard mix. You're going to get a black and white. Okay. And then the last one, hue, saturation, color, and luminosity. That all has to do with colors, not tonalities. So you don't need, we're not even going to bother with those. Okay. All right. Everybody understands everything in the overlay section works off of 50% gray. Okay. Everything in the darken mode works with the darker tones. All right. Black overpowering everything. All right. And of course, middle gray being the demarcation point as to whether it affects it or doesn't affect it. Okay. And the same thing with the lighten mode. Lighten mode obviously favors light colors or light tonalities, white being the predominant one. And then overlay, depending on which one, it's going to favor the midtones over anything else. All right. We good with that? Long explanation to kind of break down the basics of these blend modes. Okay. So here we go. We can just see how all of these interact differently. All right. Now, the other thing you're going to notice is right now I am manipulating, all right, the portrait layer. That portrait layer is above, okay? And it's going to interact differently than if I say, all right, let's bring our horizontal layer across, okay? And we do those, okay? So to a certain extent, the order of those layers is going to play a role, all right, in how the end looks. And I think I'll be able to explain that or show it to you when we do the actual example. Okay, so any final questions on any of this? I don't want to beat a dead horse. All right, and I don't want to fry brains too early. We're good? Okay. All right. So again, this is going to be the end result. Okay. And when I was looking for images to create for this particular lesson, this is a picture of my house. I kind of envisioned, my face up in the trees, kind of like looking down onto the house. But as I manipulated, I realized, looking down doesn't look as good with the shape of the tree behind it. Okay. So if we remove that, okay, you can see the tree doesn't lend itself to looking down. It's definitely a looking up kind of thing. All right. All right. So this is what we're going to replicate. All right. So what we're going to do is we're just going to, as I always do, I tend to start off in Lightroom. Okay. So what I did is I just took a bunch of photos of myself against a white background. Okay. Now I did it. I did it on a white background just because I could have very easily done it on a black background. But the one thing that I find facilitates utilizing these blend modes is if you have a predominant solid white, solid black, or solid 50% gray to work off of. Okay. Like for example, the explanation I said with the film, of taking the foreground and shooting with a very, very light background or very light sky, right? Often when you are exposing for the foreground, what happens to that sky? It turns white. So there you have your white space to overlay something into it. Okay. All right. So that was my train of thought. Okay. And of course, I, took a few exposures of my house. And I kind of picked this one here just because it was nicely toned. Okay. So we're going to use this and with the portrait ones, I wasn't sure which one was going to fit best. I kind of originally in my head, this is what I had in mind, kind of looking down. Okay. But when I was playing with it, it didn't quite turn out. All right. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay. So, and even this one didn't quite turn out the way I wanted. All right. So we're going to just pick, we can pick this one. Let's pick one that I haven't used. Okay. So we're going to take that. And all I did is I just brightened up my background a little bit. And really didn't do much else with it. Okay. Everything else is pretty much straight out of camera. Okay. And then of course we need the picture of the house. So Control E opens it up in Photoshop. Okay. Now I took these with two different cameras at two different resolutions. I took the portraits with my studio camera, which is 100 megapixels, I'm sorry, 50 megapixels, in comparison with my street camera, which for the house, which is 21 megapixels. Okay, so there's going to be a difference. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, and I'm just dragging it off my layer, hovering over my my house photo, and I'm just going to shift drop. All right, and by shift drop it puts it into the center. Let's go ahead and zoom out. All right, and you can see how much bigger that image is. Okay, now I want to be able to kind of place it in position. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reduce the opacity so I can see the underlying photo. All right. And I'm going to use shift to kind of constrain my scaling down. And I'm just going to rotate a little bit here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with placement to something that I kind of think it's going to look nice. All right, and maybe something there. Okay, so let me zoom in a little bit. All right, so you can see as you, I have about 70% transparency. I'm able to move this around and kind of get it into a position where I think it's going to look kind of good. All right, in with that tree. All right. And at any point, you can just maybe rotate it a little bit or whatever it is. Okay. All right. And let's just move that over just a touch. All right. And I see right where my glasses are, some of that tree from behind is poking through. I don't know if that's going to look good. It may not. Okay. All right, but I'm fairly comfortable with the size and position here, so I'm going to go ahead and lock that in, bring my opacity back up. All right, and now we're going to start playing around with some of the blend modes, okay? Now, I know right off the bat, if I use a darken mode, it's going to interact with the sky, all right? Because darken is most effective when darker pixels are against lighter pixels. The darker pixels will be the dominant pixels, all right? So because I shot this on a white, all right, I know that any of the darken modes is going to make that white disappear, okay, because we saw it with the examples I gave earlier. And anything that is black is going to overpower everything else and stay. All the pixels in between, the gray tones, all right, they're going to interact with each other, okay? And they'll either override the pixels underneath, or they will multiply together or become subservient to the pixels underneath. So if I have darker pixels in the trees, and you'll see that, it's going to override any lighter pixels in the portrait part, okay? So let's see, darken, multiply, that's way too dark, okay? Color burn, linear burn, all right? So none of these is really going to probably be what I need, okay? So let's take a look at the lighten modes. Oh, the lighten modes, that works if I wanted to use my portrait as the base and put something behind it. We can, if we have time, we might even play around with that, okay? But right now, what I want to do is I want to place my face up in the trees, looking down on everything, okay? So the lighten modes may not work, all right? Yeah, because it's making everything kind of disappear, all right? So darken modes, not quite. Lighten modes, not quite, okay? Now, could we have pre-visualized this in any way? All right. Anybody want to venture a guess if we could have used what we've just learned about the darken layers, the lighten layers, and the midtone layers, if we can kind of pre-visualize what would happen? Anybody want to venture? Nobody wants to be brave. What's the majority of the tonality in the portrait layer?
That'd be white. White?
No,
No?
no, I'm not talking about the background.
Oh, okay.
Exclude the background. We're talking about the subject. What are the predominant tones in our subject?
Dark.
They're midtones to darks. Absolutely. All right. They're midtones to darks. Okay. So that gives you a clue as to where you might even want to start. All right. Because there are very, very, very few what you might even consider to be light tones in the portrait. All right. Maybe a little bit here in my temple where the light caught my gray hair. All right. But even in the beard, okay, in the beard, you know, if we squint, they're probably a little bit darker than midtone. Okay. Skin tone is definitely probably a little bit darker than midtones. Okay. And of course, we go into shadow to the backside of the head and dark, almost black in the shirt, the t-shirt. Okay. So, you know, understanding that about the subject, all right, we could have eliminated any of the light blend modes right off the bat because there's really nothing light here. Okay, so the dark or the overlay. Okay, all right, and none of those are working. Okay, so now we got to ask ourselves, okay, none of those really is getting me to the place that I want to be at. All right, where the face is kind of overpowering the trees a little bit and looking like it's blending into the trees. Okay, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, and we have to now start thinking a little bit outside the box while keeping in mind how those blend modes operate. Okay, and this is where I have a problem with some of the tutorials on YouTube that just oversimplify things because they're picking images that are ideal, all right, for the task that they're trying to illustrate. Here it is. We're taking a Joe Schmo approach to this is what I want to do. How do I get there? All right. I'm not picking and choosing my images by any means. All right. I could have made this tutorial super simple. You do this, this, and this, and you're done. All right. But that's not the reality of things. Okay. So now we have to understand that, okay, I need the pixels in my face that are lighter, all right, to come forward. Okay. Because if we really think about this, what is it that I'm trying to do? Okay. I'm trying to preserve this part of the portrait. Okay. All right. I want that to be visible. Okay. Everything back here, I kind of want to disappear. All right. So all of this, I want to disappear. Okay. And sorry, Brian, I'm gonna have to mute you. Okay, sorry. All right, and then of course, oops, let's go to blue. We want this to disappear. Okay, so we're asking a lot of a blend mode. We're asking it to get rid of white. We're asking it to get rid of black. And we're asking it to keep everything here. Okay. But we have light tones that would be, eliminated if we got rid of them here. And we have dark tones that would be eliminated if we got rid of them here. Right? Everybody see that? Okay. So now we have to start thinking about, okay, how can we preserve certain elements and get rid of other elements? Okay. All right. So let's take a step. I'm going to create a solid color layer here. I'm going to make it black. All right. And now I'm going to apply some of these layer effects. Okay. So if we darken, we multiply, we color burn, none of these really work. Okay. And if we lighten, okay, we can see that all of those we retain, except for the color dodge. Okay. We retain that. All right. And the overlay, well, we have to, none of that is really going to work. All right. So let's keep it to screen. Okay. We're going to keep it to screen. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, what I want to do is I want to limit it to the area where I want my face to be visible. Okay. All right. So that means the underlying layer needs to be darker than the pixels that I want to preserve, right? All right, so for this, I'm going to create a blank layer, and just as an experiment, I'm going to create a round brush. Let's make it a little bit larger. I'm going to select black as my foreground color, and I'm going to paint. Okay, now you'll notice that, all right, wherever I just painted black, okay, I'm kind of using it as a mask that allows my face to come through, all right, and the blend mode to be maintained, all right, because I'm using black, okay, because now if I take that and let's say I use gray, okay, where are we? Screen mode. Let's where we're at. Lighten screen mode. Yeah, we'll keep it screen mode. Okay. Anything that is darker than middle gray. So let's bring this to, there we go. A delete. Let's, all right. Oh, I see what I did. I ruined, I see what I did. I painted on this. All right. I gotta undo it until I get rid. There we go. There we go. Whew. See what happens when I don't pay attention to what the heck I'm doing? All right, here we go. All right. If I use a mid-tone gray, all right, as compared to a solid black, I get kind of a diffused look to it. Okay. So now if I use white, all right, white is going to obscure everything because we're using our screen mode. White's going to overpower everything. So as long as I keep everything that I apply to that underlying layer 51% or darker, I should be able to preserve the look of the face. Okay, makes sense? All right, because again, anything below that is going to, lighten up too much, and we don't want to lighten it. We want to darken it. Okay, or no, we want to preserve it. Okay. All right, so here is our screen mode. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to bring this back to normal. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mask. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to remove the background. All right, and there's a mask. I now have a mask that got rid of all the white, which now allows me to, when I apply that screen mode, okay, all that white is not influencing all that outer area. I can now concentrate just on the face. Everybody see why I did that? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. I'm using a blend mode that favors white. Had I shot this on a black background, all right, I don't know if I can very easily, here, let me see, control. All right, let's do this. I'm going to take this, control, control shift I. Let's turn that all black. Control delete. Normal. Delete. Where's my, delete. Fill, edit, fill. Black, okay, there we go. Control D, okay. So here is if I were to photograph myself on a black background, okay? That's all I did, okay? Actually, let's get rid of that mask. All right, all right. If we change to lighten mode, okay, gives me the same result as this layer, all right, with just a mask removing the background, all right? Because if I did not remove that background in lighten mode, that overrides everything because it's solid white, okay? Everybody get that? Okay, we're just using blend modes. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna save that one for later. We'll save this one for later. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. I made one too many copies. All right, so we created a mask. All right. Mask gets rid of all the white. Okay. My blend mode is in screen. It could be, lighten. It could be, actually, lighten might even be better because I'm looking at, I'm looking at the skin tone there coming through. Okay. And what I want to do now is I want to create black. All right, see how I have black underneath that? See how my everything now shows up? Okay, I want to create black just underneath where my face is. So I've already created a mask for my face. I can simply copy that. So Alter Option, drag it down and apply it there. Okay. And now you'll see that that mask, this mask here, is only keeping the black in my face area, okay? While this mask here is removing all the white from the outer area, all right? Same mask, all right, being applied to different places. But now I can take the mask underneath it here, and with a nice big soft round brush, right? White as my black as my foreground color. We can remove the parts that we don't want. Okay. All right, and I definitely don't want, I'll go with a hard brush. I definitely don't want anything where the roof line is. Okay. All right. Okay. Now we have to contend. All right. Well, before I move forward, everybody understands what I did with that mask. Okay. It just gave me a solid black base to use for my blend mode. Okay. So I'm taking a lighten blend mode, okay, and creating solid black, which negates it. Okay. Had I been using a multiply layer, I would have created white to negate it. Okay. All right. Now I want to clean up the edges here. All right. So on this mask layer right here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to use black as my foreground color with a nice hard brush. And I'm just going to click, shift click. All right. And if I want to clean up the back side of my skull, I can just do that. Okay. And if I wanted to, let's just clean up all of this area here. Just to Alt or Option brings you to the mask. Get rid of all that. Okay. And if I wanted to, I can use some opacity on my brush. All right. So I have black as my foreground color. I can use the opacity of my brush. Let's go to about 20%. All right. And I can paint out some of the underlying, all right, and make some of that, the tree line come through. Okay. All right. And then I would have to do the same thing with that upper mask. Let's turn that to 100%. What are we doing here? Oh, did I? Control D. I think, did I paint on it? No, I didn't. Okay, good. Lion screen. Okay. All right. Keeping an eye on the silhouette of the tree. You know, do I want my ear in there? Maybe not. Let's get rid of some of that. Okay. So you can manipulate it however way you want. You know, maybe we'll take some of this away here. Okay. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay. And pretty much that's how you can, and if you wanted to, you could even apply some, all right, remember I said earlier, we can manipulate the tonality of the blend layer. Okay, so I can create a curves adjustment. Make sure that you clip it to that underlying layer. Okay, and we can make it darker. We can make it lighter. Oh, let me grab that. There we go. Okay. And we can also utilize any of the mid-tone. Okay. Screen, there we go. Okay. And if we wanted to, we can take that group, group it with that one. All right, and we can reduce the opacity if we needed to. Okay. And voila. All right, any questions so far? I mean, not the most artistic image, but it gives you an idea of what you can do with layer blend modes and creating a double exposure. Okay. All right. No questions? All right. Let's do something similar here. All right. Let's take wrong one. I'm going to take the house and I'm going to bring it in to here. All right. My house image is a lot smaller. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it bigger. Just for the sakes of this. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it below. Okay. And what I'm going to do is just kind of play around with some of the blend modes here. Lighten mode. Okay. And then I can play around with the placement. Let's make that a little bit larger. All right. Make that a lot larger. I just want to get the kind of like the tree in there. All right. Just to give you as an example. Okay. All right. So here is a more simplified version. What we're utilizing is the starkness of the pure white background with a lighten mode. Okay. So kind of like what we did before, but we used a mask to get rid of the white. In this case, we're using the white as part of our image element. All right. And we just want the underlying element to come through the silhouette of the portrait. Okay. But what I want to do is I don't want the area of the face to come through. Okay. So for this, I can create another layer. All right. And with a big soft round brush, let's make it bigger. White as my foreground color. Nope, I'm sorry. We're still working with lighten mode. So black as my foreground color, I can bring some of the detail of my face in. Okay. Everybody see that? Okay. And to reverse it, you can't use white. All right. You can't use white. If I use white, this is what I get. Okay. So we can't use white. We can use the eraser tool. One of the few times the eraser tool is actually of benefit. Okay. Because usually the eraser tool is not useful. All right. All right. Any questions? This is the tutorial you'll see on YouTube all over the place. This is simple. You're not going to learn anything from this. Hopefully you learned something from my tutorial. Any questions?
Yeah, view it about 20 times, I may understand it.
Oh, Christ. Forget it. Yeah, I think you're going to need more than 20 times. I still don't fully understand it. You know, I can fake it very well. No, honestly, if you understand the basics of what each group does, it's the big step. If you understand how it interacts with solid white and solid black, it's a big step. Okay. If you understand how it interacts with middle gray, oh my God, that's a huge step, because the majority of anything you ever do in Photoshop is based off of that middle gray. And I've proved it, you know, time and time again with a lot of my tutorials. So, all right. Alan, any questions? Mark, you came in a little bit late, but you got any questions?
No, I got it. That was good.
You probably knew some of this already anyway, right?
Actually, I needed to see this.
Okay, awesome.
You know, it would be fun what you said about 20 times is that in this kind of stuff, and one of the other ones I think I sent you a picture of was that it just showed up as kind of a happy accident when I was trying to do something else. You know,
Right.
like I noticed when you were poking around there a couple times, I go, oh, that's kind of a neat little effect, you know, and
Oh, okay.
you know,
Yeah.
those types of things. And you think, okay, yeah, so that would be fun to, you know, see how that works and, you know, different
Yeah.
scenarios and that type of thing.
Yeah. Let me tell you, if you have time to experiment and look for those happy accidents, by all means. But a lot of times, you know, we don't have that luxury. All right. I know as a working photographer with client work,
Yeah.
I don't have that luxury. All right. They're expecting a set result at a set time, you know, and I got to be able to deliver it. So I won't promise them something as complex as this if it was just all experimentation, you know.
Well, unlike you, I don't have clients.
No, I understand. I understand. But you
Hey,
know, clients don't have to necessarily be business clients.
yeah,
Clients could
right,
be like, you know, you promised your wife or
right.
something, or you know, you promised your cousin that you'd do something for them.
Hey, I don't know if you can see it, Doug, because my camera is broken on my computer, but I took a quick uh, photo shot and sent it to your Facebook. But it's the image from 60 years ago that I did my first double exposure, or not my first, but it's what started the interest, and you can kind of, that was, I think, one of the ones where I was sticking the negative together, or I would take turns putting paper under the enlarger.
Okay. This one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Um, is there any way of rotating this? I don't think I can rotate it. But anyway, yeah. So if we look at this, okay, and apply it, okay, we can see the dark pixels. All right, I'm going to say pixels. even
Yep.
though this was taken, with an analog camera. All right, I want to apply it to what we learned today. Okay, we're taking dark pixels, and the dark pixels here are overpowering the light pixels in the background. All right, see, we have light pixels in the background, where we get a little bit of the darker pixels from the background, and I'm calling the close up the background for some reason. I don't know why. You can see where it crosses over, it really influences it. Okay. And all right, looking at it, and it looks like there's a groundscape that she was standing on, right?
Yeah, she's running down a hill, actually.
Running down a hill. And I'm assuming that everything behind her was a lot lighter. All right. And the reason I say that is because I'm not seeing an influence of that here. Oh, wait a minute. Did you say you did this in darkroom?
Yeah, I did this in a dark room.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so you can manipulate that. You can mask. You can, right. Oh, okay. Let's see. Can I see where you kind of masked it? Actually, I think I can. I see something along here, and I see something along here that you probably either used your hand or some kind of circular dodge tool or a circular burn tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, it looks like there's some artifacting going on here too. So yeah. Okay. Now that you mention it, I see it. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome. That's old school Photoshop.
1970.
1970. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. All right, guys. Any last minute questions before we cut out of here? Hopefully it gives you some incentive to experiment with some double exposure stuff. Maybe, kind of, sort of, yes?
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Alan, you got probably a ton of bird photos that are against a very light background.
He just left.
Oh! He didn't want to be put under the fire. He knows that I'll hold him to it. Okay, that's all right. All right, guys. If there are no further questions, I appreciate you hanging out with me on another Tuesday.
Monday.
Or Monday. You're right. I'm getting my Mondays and Tuesdays confused. Mark understands why.
Thank you, Doc.
I kind of sort of do things like this on a Tuesday too. So, but anyway, thank you for hanging out. And if there's anything you want me to cover next Monday, feel free, like Brian, to shoot it over, and I'll try to cover it. If not, I'll come up with something. All right. Stay safe. It's been nice and cool lately. The weather's been kind of cool. I actually had to put on my light blanket at night. So stay comfortable, I guess you can say. And we'll see you all next Monday. Okay?
Okay. Thanks, Doc.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Good night.
Be safe.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.